You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to the writingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to this week's Writing Community Chat Show. Hello and welcome to this week's Writing Community Chat Show. I am back in the show seat because Chris was missing me last week and I hope you were too. You might not have been, but there you go. It's brilliant to be back here. I'm very excited about tonight's show and we've got some brilliant guests lined up. If you haven't noticed, we normally advertise the show a week in advance. We've now put 5 shows up on YouTube. You can see the next 5 guests. Incredible. Chris Hooley, great to be back next to you. How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, mate. It was a brilliant interview last week with JD/Barry. I learned a lot. I've been thinking about it quite a bit, like how he went from...
Yeah, I have. And I've been blazing in the sunshine for days on end. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, no, that sounds fun.
Sorry, Chris.
But no, how he went from basically being a traditionally published author to doing his own stuff and making a hell of a lot more money from it. Like, it was just surprising, and shocking. In the best possible way. I
mean, that's the dream, right? That becoming an author that is signed and maybe it's not going your way, to then going backwards might seem a terrifying thing, but then to do that and actually make it more than you had in that sense is incredible. So yeah, I caught up on that and it was a lot of fun.
I was thinking about this and I was thinking, he sold 3 million copies of his first police procedural. Now, if you sell them, even at 99p, and you make 70%, you're a multi-millionaire.
I know. FYI, our guest tonight, there's little shaded out boxes in the bottom of the screen. And when you said that, her mouth was swinging open. Like, oh my God. So it's a shocking fact and incredible, Chris. Really is.
Really it was a great interview. And I definitely recommend anyone to go back and have a little look through the archive.
It's had a lot of feedback. It's had a lot of views as well, more than usual in that time space. So it's definitely something that's intrigued people to watch, and I can see why. But yeah, Chris, thank you for doing that on your own. I know it's the summertime. We're going to have times when we're both busy, and we're talented. We're talented enough. We're lucky enough that we're both talented in the sense that we can take that on our own. And you did a great job on your own. So thank you for doing that. And I'm sure the audience loved that, rather than cancelling the show, that you actually did that for us. So thank you. Thank you to all in the chat.
Where were you at? Because I remember you went to a festival, but I couldn't remember where you went.
So in Wales, we're a beautiful country. It's like 3.5 million people in the entire country. When you look at like London, for example, which is England's attached to Wales in that sense, and London itself is like 3 times the size of Wales. So it's a fantastic place, but it's very short on festivals. And the first time last year they did one quite close to me, and I'm talking 10 minutes away, and this was the second year, so we took a risk on it. It was fantastic. You got to see bands like UB40, Mel C, Natalie Imbruglia, the Kooks, and all these fantastic old school bands that I grew up with. And the weather was, as Anya said, I look tanned. Yes, damn right. I've got a hell of a sun thing going on. Look at that. But yeah, it was amazing. And yes, I missed the show, but as I said, you did a fantastic job. So thank you very much. And I did miss the show. I'm very excited for tonight's show. You might be able to tell. Yeah. Also, what happened this week that I really want to talk about. The other week, we released this notepad for authors that you can write all your stuff in. There's great tips in there, great advice, and places for people who are very structured to write things, and people who like to freelance in that style and just write whatever you want. But comments. That has had one sale from Anya. Thank you, Anya. One sale we've made on this book. Brilliant. Appreciate that. I hope you've used it well, and I'm using it for my current screenplay. But also, I released a raffle this week where you guys can win an amazing ASIO classic retro keyboard. And this is a mechanical keyboard based on a typewriter by ASIO. It's a brilliant keyboard company. I'm very, very jealous of not having that keyboard. But it's on raffle, £1.50 a ticket. There's only 300 tickets. So your odds, if you only buy one ticket, 300 to 1. So far, there's only 5 tickets sold, which is incredible. You've got 28 days to buy your tickets. The link is in the description right now. Go and get your tickets for that, because we'll be sending someone a brand spanking new ASIO Classic keyboard. I just wish it could come to me, but it can't. It's got to go to one of you guys. So please go and buy those tickets, because if you don't buy them, someone's going to win them very cheaply, and we're going to have to pay for those tickets and the keyboard. But there you go. Yeah, wicked. Please go and do that.
I'm slightly annoyed, Agate, that you've banned my ability to put the comments onto the chat.
I have not done that, Chris Hooley.
You definitely have, because I tried to put one on just now, and it wouldn't pop up. So you know, you've lost some autonomy there in terms of the things that
you've done that yourself.
They're going to throw you off. I can't now put up onto the screen.
I think you've done that yourself, mate. I haven't touched it. Anyway, what were you looking to put up there? Was it Brandon?
It was Brandon. He asked a question whether you were tanned everywhere.
Yeah, I did see that. I'm not tanned everywhere because I don't like to get my top off in front of people, and I definitely kept my pants on. So no, the answer to that is no.
Great question.
Yeah, great question. So there's a bit of feedback going on for some reason. Okay, so one thing before we do move on, and this is a question we can ask our guest tonight as well, and I want you guys in the audience to answer this, is when you're writing characters, what is the technique that you use to make them feel more real and more relatable? Chris, do you have any answers to that question? I think
do you know what? I can't say I do, because the most recent story I wrote was about rabbits, from the perspective of rabbits. So in order to make them more believable, I researched a lot about rabbits that I didn't know.
Well, okay, but what did you research that surprised you about rabbits?
Rabbits eat their own poo.
I'm not that surprised, because dogs and cats and all sorts of things like to do that.
No, but rabbits are apparently very selective in terms of, if the poo is hard and dry, they leave it. But if it's moist, they eat it because it's still got vitamins inside it. So,
well, that's amazing, and I'm pretty sure our guest just turned the show off. No, not at all. Yeah. So, when it comes to relatable characters, I think what could be really important if someone who's writing relatable characters and wants to make them relatable is, first of all, using the area around you. So you're using their senses to portray what they're feeling and sensing, and I think that's valuable. But also making them kind of vulnerable, as we talked about before. If your character is vulnerable and has flaws, you're going to be more relatable to that character in that sense. But also, if they've got goals, and you just make them a real character in the sense that they're not just a superhero that goes and does that. They have to have a character arc, they have to have flaws, and they have to have missions that fail and the ones that succeed. So it's all about having flawed characters. And there you go. Linda says, I love flawed characters. I think that is a great thing, especially when it comes to protagonists. A flawed character works really well. Cool. Chris, are you ready for tonight's guest?
I am indeed. We did promise her that we'll chat for a couple of minutes. It's 8 minutes into the show.
I'm sorry. I told you I'm excited for tonight's show, that I'm going to ramble. You have to tell me to shut up. Sorry, guys. Tonight's guest is, I'm excited for this, and we've already had some humor pre-show, so I think this is going to be a good show, and we're going to laugh our way through it without actually saying anything I don't want to say them bad, not valuable, but we're going to have a laugh and realize the show's finished. But I'm looking forward to that. So tonight's guest is the author. She's an author of, she hails from Richmond in Virginia. Her debut novel, The Minuscule Mansion of Myra Malone. I got that out. It's above Chris's head there. It's a fantastic cover. It's already making waves, and she's becoming, very quickly becoming a rising star in the literary world. And her unique storytelling style encompasses novels, humor, satire, and essays. And her ability to balance comedy with thought-provoking themes has earned her a dedicated following. And from her contributions to renowned publications like McSweeney's to her stories appearing in various anthologies, Audrey's work has gained both critical acclaim and the hearts of her readers. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Audrey Burges. Hello, Audrey.
Hi.
Hello, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Sorry for the long delay. Just
No.
started rambling. I hope you're well. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm great. I don't know how I can follow multimillionaire and rabbit poop. I don't know. I think that my contribution to this conversation can really only just take us down in
That's fine.
flames at this point. So I'll do the best I can to right the ship, but y'all have just really set the bar high for me.
We love to go down in flames. It's all good.
Yeah. I mean, the multimillionaire bit, yeah, that's impressive. But the rabbit poop thing, yeah, I'm sure we can come up with better things to talk about than that. I should hope, anyway.
Brandon says, hi, Audrey, as does Halo. Thank you for your comments, guys. We love you chatting in the comments. Malingo says, hi, Audrey, don't read the comments. Audrey, read the comments. So, yeah. A bit of a mix and match in there. Audrey, I mentioned you're from Virginia. Was that right? Redmond, Virginia?
Yes. Richmond, yeah.
Richmond, sorry. How is it there at the moment?
It is lovely. We finally have some heat, which I will very quickly eat my words because in about 2 weeks I'll be like, why is it so hot? But right now it's about 82 degrees and sunny and beautiful. And we had our last little bit of wintry kind of yuckiness just in time for Memorial Day weekend when the kids wanted to go to the pool. And so they're very happy to have pool weather now. So, and it will be that way for probably another 5 months.
It's nice, isn't it? We had such a long period between winter and spring and summer. Well, late spring. It was horrible and just suddenly started becoming nice like recently. And it's so nice that the freedom the kids have and they're just out till late. And that's also a problem because they stay up at like 9 o'clock thinking it's bedtime. It's not bedtime for another hour.
Right. Yeah. And then you don't get to do anything because you're just,
Exactly. I mean, that's a great piece of advice to tell someone who's writing. When the kids are staying up till 9, 10 o'clock because it's light outside, where do you fit the writing in?
Notes app.
Nice.
Ooh. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Don't ever read my notes app. If I'm ever like a suspect in a murder and somebody actually gets access to my notes app, it's gonna do bad things for me. It's the weirdest place. It's clearly the rantings of an unstable person. But some of those things wind up making their way into books. So that's always fun.
I love that. Audrey, if we were to get your phone right now, what would be the most incriminating thing in your notes app?
Oh man.
Can you do that for us? Go on.
Oh, let me think. Oh gosh.
It doesn't have to be the most incriminating, but if you've got something
No. Right now I have the top note that I have is for a humor piece I was tapping away at this weekend. Which is entitled "A Day in the Life of Me, a Woman with a Geriatric Uterus," according to whomever the hell coined that term.
Oh wow, that is fantastic. See, that's why you need a notepad, guys, and there's one right there you can buy.
That's right. No, I'm always I have learned that the most important thing for me as a writer, I've also got a full-time job and I've got 2 kids. I never let an idea go. I've learned too many times that if I think I'm going to remember it later, I will not. So even if I just write, 2 or 3 random words that I can get back to in a week or so, I'll be able to remember the anchor point that I was trying to start from.
This might be an American thing. But Brandon says in the comments, do you remember when the TV had to remind parents that they had kids?
It's what was it, 10 p.m.? Do you know where your children are? Yeah, I remember.
No way.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Those were still on the air when I was a kid. I'm probably dating myself.
Oh, there you go. Halo said, yeah, it's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? I love that.
There you go. Yep.
Cool. Right. I told you we're going to talk bonkersness. Right. The first part of the show is the road to writing. I'm going to play this little video, Audrey, and we're going to talk about that because otherwise we'll end up an hour in when we haven't started the show. The road to writing, I'm going to play the video. Let's get into it. So, Audrey, can you please let everybody know, where did the writing start for you and what was the inspiration for you to start that process and kind of how did that go once you started doing it?
So I was one of those nerdy kids who spent a lot of times in the closet in my room reading everything I could get my hands on and writing everything I could too. And I had parents who really actively encouraged that. They were both English teachers in this high school in this tiny, tiny town I lived in on the edge of the Navajo reservation in Arizona. And so whenever I would write a story, my parents took it absolutely seriously, treated it like the finest literature they'd ever seen. Had some suggestions, but for the most part, my mom used to bind stories that I wrote in actual bindings and put a little about the author.
Wow.
That, of course, never would have gotten any inflated expectations from that was going to be how writing actually went. But I actually was an English major in college, planned on writing, went to law school instead, became a lawyer. And one thing you do a lot when you're practicing law is you write a ton all the time, and you have to write fast and you have to write accurately, and you might have a brief that's going to be 50 pages and it's due tomorrow by midnight and it's got to be flawless. But when you're doing that, you tend to forget that you're not doing really any of that creative writing anymore. And so for me, that went on for about 20 years, probably close to 20 years. And then one day I was driving in my car. I had a job at the time that had me kind of commuting all over the state of Virginia. And there was a content call on National Public Radio for essays about, Mama Stanberg's cranberry relish. I have to take a quick side jog to tell you what that is and why that inspired me. Mama Stanberg's cranberry relish is a onion and cranberry horseradish relish that is made by people with fine taste at the holidays. And so my mother and I adore this and make it every year, and we do not share it. I would like to say that it's because other people really are angling for a taste of it, but they absolutely are not. No one else loves this. And so we actually, whenever we make this, and we've made it since I was a kid, I thought, oh, I can write an essay about Mama Stanberg's relish. So I did. And 2 days later, I got contacted by National Public Radio saying, we'd like to put this on the air. We'd like to actually record you reading this story.
Wow.
Whereupon I told literally everyone I had ever seen for, I think, 24 straight hours. People in the grocery store accosted by me. Did I mention I'm going to be on National Public Radio? I was really, truly insufferable for as long as I could possibly be, until they actually contacted me about a day after that and said, we're really sorry. We've decided to go in another direction. And after, I just, no. So after I kind of, cried and felt very foolish for a little while, I started to think about it, and I thought, I haven't written anything creatively, really, in about 15, 20 years. And the first thing that I did, I got a call from NPR. So maybe instead of saying I'm going to write someday, I might want to actually do it. So that was in October of 2018. And so it was almost to National Novel Writing Month. So I thought, I always said I was going to do that. I'm going to try that. I'll outline something and see if I can, make the math work. Do I think I have a story here that could reach 50,000 words? I wrote 62,000 in 3 weeks. And it's been going ever since.
Wow.
So I started writing. Oh, I'm sorry if I'm getting feedback. So I started writing that book and was querying that book after I got it in a more queryable form. And at the same time, to kind of build an audience, I started writing humor and short fiction and essays, and that kind of became its own thing and its own audience. And that's how I landed with The Mansion, because when I was querying this first book, which was really kind of a dark, twisty mystery, it wasn't connecting with the credits I was starting to get as a writer. So I finally, actually, Christy Swift, who's in this chat, was in my writing group with me, and I said, I feel like I need to write something a little lighter hearted. I'm calling you out, I know. And I feel like, and I had been following a lot. It was during the pandemic, and I'd been following a lot of writers that had fallen into various hobbies. And one of the ones that, for whatever reason, the algorithm kept suggesting to me was miniature kits. People were making little miniature kitchens and miniature book nooks you could slide on your shelf. And I thought, well, maybe I'll write a romantic comedy. I'll write a romantic comedy about this. Maybe she makes these kits and it goes viral and she winds up meeting somebody. And I got about probably about the first 1,800 words into writing that book. And the scene where the eye in the mirror winks popped into my head as I was writing. And I thought, oh, no, wait, this is not a lighthearted romantic comedy. This is something very different. And it just kind of took me from there.
It's amazing. That's I love the fact that you had a diversion in that. But what I'm also intrigued at is the fact that you had both parents as English teachers. And how did that impact you on the early days of writing? And was there like an overwhelming pressure to perform as an author, knowing that your parents were English teachers, or were you quite comfortable because of what they were?
Oh man, I think it depended on the age. I think when I was pretty young, I was pretty reliant on. My parents are they became linguists when I was a teenager. So, which I kind of say it's like being raised by wolves, but with better grammar. I just kind of they were very regimented in making sure that my writing actually met a certain standard. And so because of that, I think I relied on them a lot when I was younger. When I got to college, I kind of decided I already knew everything and quickly discovered I was wrong. And it was shocking. And so then it was one of those kind of comeuppance moments, I think, for my parents, where they're like, yes, you do need to know how to do this. And so, but I think,
Sorry, were you ever able to lean on them in that respect as an author because of their knowledge and skills?
Yes, I would say that probably my mom is my most reliable beta reader.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and she's really she doesn't pull punches. She's never pulled punches. And so, she'll bring me back. She always reads in hard copy, and she'll bring me back a binder that just has it's like a rainbow of Post-it notes in the side with all of these things that she's noted. And we don't always agree. We have very different styles, but she is. I think the benefit, it's so important to find beta readers, first of all, that will finish reading. Second of all, who will not hold back, and not be nice about it. My mom is nice, but she also doesn't hesitate to like circle something and write out to the word really.
Yeah.
So but they both do.
It's something that I was going to mention, and it's important that when you have beta readers, if they're close like that, it's really important that they're not showing you the love because of who you are. They're showing the love because of the quality of the story. And it's really important as someone that might be going in that process that beta readers need to be real, and they need to be, and you also need to remember that's one person, and 100 readers could find your story differently. But you need to find someone that you trust rather than just saying it's great because it's your family. But what it sounded like that you have a brilliant relationship in that sense. So be careful and cautious with who you take as a beta reader.
Yep.
But also
and get more than one. Having multiple perspectives really helps, because then you can kind of see the common threads and what people suggest.
Yeah.
So Audrey, what really fascinates me is. Yeah, we can try again if you want.
Yeah, my Siri apparently wants to weigh in.
Yeah, get Siri involved. Why not? What fascinates me is how you said, obviously, you had a full-time job. You're a lawyer. A lot of people, their impression of a lawyer would be that they wouldn't have that much spare time. You've almost rose from the ashes of this sort of like creative endeavor that you tried to get this work out there. You told everyone about it, and then it fell flat on its face. And you felt embarrassed, and you felt like, you needed a different outlet. So try and take us back to that bit of the initial idea for you writing a novel. I know you said it was Writing Novels Month. Is that NaNoWriMo that you were?
NaNoWriMo. Yep.
So you've got that, but then how did the idea come to you, and how did you navigate the process of working full time and then doing this creative project as well?
So for that first book, and actually, I don't think Myra Malone would exist if it weren't for that first book. I think that when I first started it, I had just an inkling of an idea for a story, and I treated it as a math problem almost. I kind of outlined where I thought the story would go, and I thought, can I get That'll be about 10,000 words. Because I'm also very used to, again, professionally, having a sense of how much space I need to get something across in terms of word count. And so I just the first thing I had to do was convince myself that I had enough of a story there to get me to 50,000 words, because I, like a lot of other writers, I'm sure, I had so many half-written things in my drafts folder that I had started and dropped, because I had a very, very nosy internal editor who would almost always wind up derailing those projects. And that, I think, was the single most effective rule in NaNoWriMo. You're not allowed to edit as you go. And that was the first time I'd ever done that in my life. And it was so liberating. The fact that I couldn't actually go back, because of course you can't edit what you don't write. And so I chunked it out. I chunked out what I knew I was going to need for each kind of part of the story. And then I chunked out how much I knew I was going to need to write after my kids were in bed every night, how much I was going to have to make up on the weekends. If I fell behind, because of course it was November, I had kind of just done a whole calculator of what I needed to do and get accomplished when. And what I discovered is, once I actually started and turned off that editor, if I had, 4 hours on a weekend, I do a lot of writing in the ballet studio that my kids take lessons in. So I'll be in the waiting room. I might have 3 hours back to back with the lessons that they're working. If I have that uninterrupted chunk of time, I can just go. My record for a 24-hour period, I think, is 13,000 words. So if I have an uninterrupted chunk of time and a very patient husband who will take the kids away so that I can actually focus on getting a chunk of the story out, I can write really fast to at least get to that, that shitty first draft stage. So yeah, it's just, but you have to, I think the biggest problem for me, and I think a lot of writers struggle with this, is you cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You cannot, I had so many, for the longest time, I just had this sense that if the first 4 chapters aren't right, where do I go from there? Well, the first 4 chapters don't matter, because they're just part of where you're trying to go. And you have to be able to judge them in context, and you have to get to the end. And you can't go to the end if you keep reinventing the beginning. And so I think that really, that was the single biggest takeaway. And the single biggest thing that I tell people who are just getting started: turn off the internal editor. You don't think you have one. You think you're just going back and making a couple changes and checking punctuation and did this come across okay? That's how it starts.
Audrey, can I just ask you, on your headset here, I think your mic is on, it's rubbing your t-shirt. Can you just
is it really? I'm so sorry.
That's fine.
Did it stop?
Can you speak
I'm gonna
now?
hold it. Yes.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna hold it.
Perfect. The question I want to ask is going back to you talking about your internal editor and blocking stories that you have progressing, but you also talked about all these stories that you'd written that you shelved, and perhaps stories that you wrote when you were younger. Has there been any stories that you wrote in that process where you blocked yourself out and said, no, this is not good enough, where you actually think if you'd carried on, would it have been good enough to have got through,
Yeah. Well, of course, I mean, I think it would have been very different. I had, when I was in college, I'd write a couple stories or poems and submit them to contests and stuff like that. And I had a couple little contests or things that I wound up in little anthologies or things like that. But I think also a lot, I tried to write a lot of memoir inflected type stuff. And I mean, no offense to anyone else who is in their, late teens, early 20s, but you don't have enough to remember yet. At least I didn't. I really thought I did, but I thought I was very compelling and literary, and I just so
if you're in your late teens, you suck. Basically.
No, what it is, Chris, I think that life experience has a lot to play when it comes to writing, but also academically it does as well. So it depends on what the mix you have of those things. It doesn't mean to say that you don't have that ability. It means that you can learn a lot from experience.
Right. I could do a turn of phrase. I could, but I also you lay it on a little thick. I go back and read some of those creative writing class pieces that I wrote. I still have them. I haven't burned them. I think they're instructive to remember where you came from. And I wouldn't have turned any of them into looking at it now, I wouldn't turn any of them into.
Yeah,
into
we've all
anything
read
else.
Catcher in the Rye, and we realized that was probably the only novel to get published that was written in that sort of that mode.
Yes.
And one is enough, if you
Yes.
ask me.
There are people who have that skill, and my hat is off to them, but I am not that person. Yeah.
Audrey, we're flying through this, and I want to get onto the segments in the right time because I'm sure we're going to get value from each of them. The next part of the show is the road to writing. We're going to talk about the minuscule mansion of Myra Malone, and I'm still impressed I can say this. But we're going to get onto that next. So once we play this video, I hope you've got a good pitch in there that you can tell everybody what the story is all about.
All right.
I feel this is going to be good. So the road to writing part 2, everybody. So, first of all, congratulations for releasing this book, because it seems like it's been a hell of a journey and you've got it here now. Can you please let everybody know what the minuscule mansion of Myra Malone? I jinxed myself, didn't I? Can you let everybody know what that story is all about, please?
It's just one long tongue twister. The whole book is you just have to keep saying it. That's the test of the book. No, it's so the Minuscule Mansion of Myra Malone is actually the title of a blog that is in the book, and it's written by a woman who did not intend to write it as a blog. Her name is Myra Malone. She's 34 years old. She lives in a little cabin on the Mogollon Rim in Arizona, so the high desert where all the ponderosa pines are. And she has spent most of her life housebound. She had a bad accident when she was a kid. She inherited a minuscule mansion that she absolutely positively would yell at you if you called a dollhouse from her step grandmother when she was quite young. And she's kind of devoted her life to curating this place, crafting furniture for it, using lessons that she was taught by her grandfather and her step grandmother. But her best friend, who really is best friend by force of will, Gwen, has kind of grown up to be a bit of a media maven, and she kind of cajoles her into putting the mansion online. And her stories about the mansion online. And not long after she does that, it goes viral and becomes very popular with people who follow her on Instagram and want to get furniture into the mansion, love the kind of aesthetic that she's developed. And so she actually, in the course of that, through some other events, winds up discovering that there is a gentleman across the country who lives in a full-sized version of the house, and it's identical right down to the furniture. And so the book kind of unwinds how that could possibly be true.
Mm. There's two fascinating parts to this. And first of all, the concept itself. I'm very intrigued as to how you came up with this concept, but also why you decided to tie the blog side of the things into the story as well. Is blogging something that is part of your life and that's why you decided to put it in there? But also, where was the inspiration for the house? Because is that something that was kind of part of your childhood, or why did that happen?
So I didn't have a dollhouse growing up. I had brothers instead. And I really, really wanted a dollhouse. So I would use their Skeletor castle and other things to pretend I had a dollhouse of my own.
Yeah.
But I didn't have one. I have always been fascinated by them. So, and I've been to several museums that have, really amazing little miniatures, and I have to be dragged away. I'm just fascinated by miniatures generally. And the reason that I had the idea for this particular story was, again, I had started following a lot of writers that had taken this up as a hobby. And algorithms being what they are, the more you look at something, the more it's like, hey, you like miniatures? Here's some miniatures. So that's kind of where the idea came from, was from this. It actually came from these Book Nook kits that people were buying that you could slide between books on your bookshelf. And some of them have lights and fireplaces and little volumes. And I just loved the idea of these kits being available and people kind of, starting this hobby.
Yeah.
But the house, the full-size house, I think really had a lot to do with the fact that I had I was in Virginia now. So I grew up in Arizona, which does not have many old things at all. And then I moved to Virginia, which by Virginia standards, not England standards, has a lot of old things, and including old, big sprawling houses. And I have always been fascinated with houses because I was, in addition to being English teachers, my parents were builders, and they built almost all of the houses that I grew up in, at least a
Wow.
portion of them, and some entirely. And so I've always kind of noticed architectural details, weird little things that no one else would see. And so in my head, the mansion was actually its full size version before it was a miniature. I knew I was going to do something about miniatures. I knew there was going to be a mansion. The connection I knew was going to be there, but it wasn't really until I started writing and these characters started talking to each other that I realized how that all kind of clicked together.
Fascinating. It really is. I mean, I never knew that people adored houses in the sense of their architecture until I saw that recent show that I can't remember the name, but it was about an ode to a house where people were writing poetry to houses.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one. That sounds right up my alley.
It was based on a true story that was never resolved. So when the story had finished, it was on Netflix recently. People were kind of mad that the story wasn't completed, and they're looking at a season 2 now. But like, it was a true story, so I don't understand why they weren't understanding that that's never been solved. But yeah, it was about in America. There was I think he was a student or a professor that loved houses, and in that sense that he used to write poems to the houses, and it became a big cult kind of movement. And
oh wow,
very, very creepy. I'm sure someone in the comments will let me know what that's called, please.
That's awesome. I'm gonna check this out as soon
Yeah,
as I see a
and
comment
I really
about
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I never understood that was a thing. So it's incredible to hear you talk about it in that sense. And I love the idea where that's come from. And were there any surprises or challenges about writing this for someone who was passionate about it that you kind of caught you off guard?
Yeah, one of the biggest surprises came after I wrote it, when I found out that a lot of the stuff I'd put in there as a guess turned out to be real. So and that's kind of the magic of the story, right? So one of the things, Myra really insists that it's not a dollhouse, right? She's very, very insistent that it is not a dollhouse. And it turns out that that is actually true. There's a set of miniature rooms at a museum here in America called the Thorn Rooms. I didn't know about it at the time I wrote the book. But when one of my other beta readers actually read the book and said, "This reminds me of these rooms that my father used to take me to in a museum when I was a child. Here's a link." And when I went and looked about the woman who created them, one of the things that she had really objected to was the idea of putting dolls in it. And I'd already written the book, and I'm like, "Oh, that's real," And some of the crafts techniques that Myra uses and stuff turned out to be. I had somebody say, it's really clear that you have done a lot of miniatures, and I was like, thank you. I've never made a miniature. But I love that. I like to think of it that that's just part of the magic of the mansion that just turned out to be real. But yeah, there were all sorts of really unexpected things that happened as I was writing, and that tends to happen to me no matter what I'm writing, whether I'm writing short form or long form. The words, if I kind of let them take over for a little bit, will often take me to unexpected places.
Yeah, brilliant. Sorry, Chris. I just got to mention this comment. Anya said it's called The Watcher. So The Watcher on Netflix.
Oh, no, I do know about that. The guy who sent the scary letter to the family that had just moved in.
There you go.
Yes, I do know about that story. Yes, that is creepy. Totally creepy. Yes.
Yeah, I suppose that links into my question in terms of, genre-wise, everything that you've mentioned sounds like it could fit into, lots of different genres in terms of horror or true crime or so why did you pick romantic comedy to go down that route and to create a love story as a backdrop to what you were writing about as opposed to anything else?
Well, the main reason was, I was querying this darker thing at a time when nobody wanted to read dark anymore. I didn't want to write dark anymore. I was housebound. I was writing a lot more humor because I just felt like I kind of needed that lightness. So I think that was the original idea. But as so often happens when I started writing, it just started to kind of get inflected with things that were really going on at the time that I didn't even really recognize until after. The sense of being, am I getting that? Are you getting feedback too? I just want to make sure I'm not.
All
It was, but just the sense of being kind of housebound and enclosed and closed off. And Diane has a little bit of a retail problem, which I definitely had at the outset of the pandemic because I thought if I could just, find the right, you know, I don't know, antique bread box, everything was going to be okay. So I think that, there were pieces of that that kind of worked their way in, and it had to be a little dark. I remember when I told my husband the idea for the book, he's like, "So it eats people?" And I'm like, "No, it doesn't eat people." And he's like, "But they," I'm like, "Well, no, it doesn't eat people, but okay, I see how you could, conclude that." So it's not a horror book. It's not a straightforward romance. It's not a straightforward literary fiction. It's a lot of different things, and I think that's just because I've always read a lot of different things, and at the time I was, definitely just kind of in that world of trying to create a story that was here but not here, because here was pretty rough at the time.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to people then? So, if somebody said to me, you have to write a romantic comedy, the first question would be, am I romantic enough? And the second question would be, am I funny enough to pull this off? So what advice would you give to somebody who decided to go down that route and to write in those two genres?
Well, I didn't wind up successfully doing that. So I will tell you that people who read romance, this does not hit all the beats that a romance would typically hit. And my hat is off to people who can do it, because I can't. For one reason is I'm terrible at writing sex scenes. I've actually written about this as a humor piece. I'm not, I don't have that setting in my brain. So, but what I would say is when you're trying to write something funny, I think there's lots of people who are way more experienced than me in teaching how to weave funny into a story. For me, it's really about making sure that you give your characters the space to interact, and you don't think about, I think people tend to kind of they think about the story they're trying to write, and you've got to do that, right? But you've also kind of got to give yourself a little freedom in the sandbox to kind of see how these folks talk to each other. A murder orgy. Wow. Speaking of things I
Oh
could
my
not
God.
successfully write.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry.
yeah.
I mute myself. Just to explain to the podcast listeners, Halo, a prolific, our first ever guest, follower of the show. She said, "I envy people who can write romantics. I tried to write one, but it turned into a murder orgy." If you ever read any of her books, that's exactly what you're going to find out.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, brilliant. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, so you really have to let yourself have a little bit of freedom to and you might wind up, cutting a lot of that later, and you got to give permission to yourself to do that too.
Yeah, sorry. Again, distracting comments. Sorry, but we
That
love it.
distracted. I couldn't not respond to that one.
Chris, there's another one in there from Christy Swift, who obviously we know is Audrey's friend, that says, "I write rom-coms and sci-fi, but Audrey uses euphemism for sex in this book," and I lolled. So tell us a little bit about that.
I'm trying. Oh, I know what she's talking about. There's a scene where I use the word compelled in a way that doesn't. It sounds a lot sexier than it is. No, but she's joked about that all the time. We actually, they're one of the reasons most of the people in my writing group actually write romance, and some of them write open door romance, which is a skill that I just do not have. Which is one reason I wound up writing a humor piece about, excerpts from the erotic novel I wrote despite my severe discomfort with sex scenes. And it was things like, Millicent felt mildly tingly and things like that, 'cause I just can't go down that road. So
Audrey, take us to the writing of the sex scene, because
oh God,
I know
He's going there. He is.
Yeah, I'm doing them. I might as well, because I know Agate's done it, because I've read the sex scene that Agate's wrote, and I know I've done it as well. My approach to it.
Hang on, I was a very, very different Chris Hooley.
Yeah,
very different.
Like, if this wins the worst sex award, in my opinion, then that's a victory in itself. So I kind of like gave myself license to be bad at writing a sex scene. So what's your sort of like stigma with a sex scene then? Why do you find it so difficult to write one?
Oh man, I think I think it's a combination of having read a lot of authors who do it really effectively, and just kind of having this. The one that springs to mind that Diana Gabaldon, who writes the Outlander series, I for me, there are sex scenes that wind up being more like a car chase, right? Where you're just kind of like, okay, can I just zoom through this and get to the next part of the plot? And then there's scenes that are really integral to learning who the characters are, right? And how they interact. And for me, um kind of walking that line without deteriorating into my internal giggly 12-year-old girl is really hard. It's really
Yeah.
hard. And so I've gotten better at it. There's more in every successive book that I've written, but I'm not anywhere to a point where I've been able to kind of seamlessly work it in. And it also, the other thing that I've discovered is it's better for me if I work it in a humorous way. I'm much better at doing it in a kind of a funny way than I am with trying to do it
it's
romantically.
really difficult if you've got a surrounding supportive family like yourself. You've got your parents to kind of read over your work, because I wrote something that I thought was quite tasty when everyone else read it, and certain people in this comment chat like, this is baby talk. But I thought it was bad because I knew family were reading it, so it's very dependent on whether you have
again my mom is my first beta reader.
Exactly.
I've got to say that.
So
my mom is my first beta reader.
Your sensitive level is going to come up, I suppose. But yeah, it's a scary thing, and a lot of people will struggle finding their feet with sex scenes, Chris. But what you mentioned was about being sort of personally connected to the ability to write the scenes through experience. Well, sometimes I don't think that's the thing, because as a crime writer, kinda.
No,
but
I didn't.
If you're a murderer, you haven't murdered people to be able to write a good murder scene. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. I did not imply that I'm writing sex scenes through experience.
Reading your latest work, Chris, I really hope not.
No.
Anyway.
Well,
Okay,
if we go down the
apologize.
murderer route, you can write about murder without having murdered somebody. So
That's
you can
what I
write a
said,
good
yeah.
sex scene without having a great sexual
And we know this is
experience.
fictionalized because Halo just said she's innocent, and I know that's not true. I know it's not true. Right, we got to move on to the last part, because we've got an extra staple question in there, and we want your questions, people in the chat. Send them in right now, and we're going to ask Audrey our questions, your questions, and they can be directed at Audrey or both of us. We're going to play the final video, part 3 of the show. We're flying through this, and that's for good reason. It's a good show. Community questions. Here we go, guys. So, sorry, comments again.
I'm sorry, Halo is on fire in the comments.
She is. And Brandon. Chris, can you please give us the first staple question of the evening?
Yes, I can. So we'll bring the tone up a little bit. The first staple question that we have is, if you could take any character from fiction and make that character your own, which character would you choose and why?
Oh, make a character. It would Strider, not Aragorn, Strider from The Lord of the Rings. Before you knew he was Aragorn, he was my first literary crush, and probably still my biggest one. And I think, again, there's just there's a lot of ways in which that story is written in a kind of a dry way. And so the fact that me reading it at, I think, 11 could have reacted as biologically as I did, I think is a testament to how well it was done. So I would love to kind of get a little bit of that into my own fiction. Yeah, that kind of.
I may regret asking this follow-up question, but what would you do with Strider?
Chris Hooley.
Normally we would say that, Agate, and there would be no additional content.
However, Audrey clearly referenced the fact that it was
Yeah, but you know,
interest.
our initial question was, you could
I
make
would
the
take him
character your
out
own,
for
what
a
would you
really
do?
nice. I'd take him out for a cup of coffee. You know, I'd have a very
That's the
above
PC
board
answer. Well done, Audrey.
interaction with him. Yes, I'd be very dignified in my interactions. Sure.
Great.
Fair enough.
Okay. Next question. If you could change the ending to any fictional story, whether it's TV, film, or literature, is in terms of a book, they're all literature. But which ending would you change and why?
Okay, so I struggle with this one because for me, the loss is part of the ache, right? That like that ache is why it's so good. But I think I'd probably put Joe with Lori in Little Women. I
Wow.
think I feel like he was the person who was there for all the most heartbreaking and important moments of her life, and there's just that shared narrative that I felt like. I understand why it happened. I can appreciate that it happened. I think it made it a more compelling read that it happened. But I would have either wound up with Joe and Lori, or Joe would have been on her own. Joe would have gone and blazed her own trail and didn't have to say boo to anybody. I think that, you know, the only other thing that occurs to me is, and this is probably a little more controversial. I don't think I would have let Jane Eyre wind up with Rochester. I'm not a huge Rochester fan. I think I would have let her again, maybe make her own way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think she'd be better off without him. He did keep a woman locked in his attic for a bit.
Yeah, it's hard to come back from that, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
And the whole almost fake marriage, you know. And then we find out about the revelation of the wife in the end. Yeah, I just
agree.
don't think.
Go your own way, Jane. Go your own way.
Yeah, I think maybe she should go. You know, she and Joe should go start their own school.
Way.
Yeah, exactly. Start their own school and, you know, do whatever they want. Artists colony.
Next question, the new one, Chris.
Ooh.
You might not have read it yet, but I'm gonna put it out there. If you had the ability to step into any fictional world created by another author, what world are you putting yourself in and why?
Oh, that's a hard one.
And please answer this in the comments as well.
Okay, well, again, and this is just going to make me go hardcore nerd. I really do. I know I already used a Lord of the Rings reference, but I will tell you that when I was that age, so that was the first set of fantasy novels that I ever read as a reader, as a child. That really was my first kind of grown up read. And my parents didn't have any rules. Like I could pick anything off the shelf. And there were some things that, again, since we lived in this tiny town, we didn't have a library. There were lots of things that we had that I probably shouldn't have picked off the shelf at that age.
Can you give us the top three?
I know.
But
Does
that
that
made
tell
it.
you anything about your parents? Because I would have been intrigued.
Yeah. So and there wasn't anything too bad, but I will say that
what is like the top three eye openers? So Lord of the Rings is like bang, changed my life.
Yeah.
What are the other two?
Oh man, the other two that changed my life probably. Well, the series that my mom had me read when I finished Lord of the Rings and was so devastated that it was over that I went into her room crying and wound up reading the Silmarillion, and I even went to a lecture as a 12-year-old because I heard that the person who was giving the lecture held the J.R.R. Tolkien chair at Oxford. That's how much of a fangirl I was for Tolkien.
Wow.
So she introduced me to the Mary Stuart series, the Merlin series, which then kind of grabbed my brain in a different way. And also I think it was great that it was a female author. So that kind of showed me a little more about world building from a female author perspective. So that would probably be number two. And then number three, I think, would probably be the first time I ever had someone publish a story of mine. I think that kind of moment where you actually realize that you've written something that landed wholly on its own without anybody's interpretation, without your gloss on it. It's there and someone else saw something that they connected to. Yeah.
Amazing. Anya says, I'd go with Lord of the Rings as well. Great shout. Halo, of course, would want to be a Sith Lord.
Understandable.
Yeah. And definitely. And Malingo says Discworld for me. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Terry Pratchett. Come on, Agate.
Not for me. I don't know. Not for me. I don't know. It's
You
not for
haven't
me.
read the Terry Pratchett novel. Right. Well, don't say it's not for you until you've read it.
I'm sorry. I read phrase that I have not read it yet.
Yeah, I will defend Terry Pratchett till death.
I know you will. Sorry.
It's
Talking
great.
about death and novels and people writing and thinking about things. It takes us to our next staple question, or final staple question, which is: you're on your deathbed, you're looking back at your writing career. What is success to you? What would you be happy with?
Oh man. That's the funny thing about writing. You always are looking for that next thing, right? You're like, oh, I got this. Now I want to, and so with that in mind, I think I'd have to say it'd be right now. I mean,
Nice.
if I would have gone back to myself in 2018 when I got that rejection about Mama Sandberg's Relish, and I'm mourning my horseradish story that I was going to tell, and I would have said, no, here's where you're going to wind up. You're going to be talking on a podcast at 8 p.m. in, the UK, and you're going to be talking about a book that's on shelves internationally, and you've written, we've got another book coming out next year, and you're published in McSweeney's, you're published in the New Yorker, you've got stuff out there, and people are liking your words, but more importantly, you're finding fulfillment in putting those words out there. I don't think I would have believed it. I think I would have, and so for me, this moment right now that I've been fortunate enough to land in with the wonderful teams that I've been able to work with and the wonderful writers I've been able to meet, I can't imagine anything better than that. I really can't.
Oh, I'm speechless. I love that. You've conquered
all.
Is she on the path?
I'm gonna print that out and put it above my computer.
And because of Discworld, Jesus, I get. And she's good Lord. I'm agree with Huli. No, Audrey, that sounds a brilliant goal, because we have so many goals on here, and they're so different, each and every one of them. And this is the question we've had more personal answers than anything else. And I love the answers we have on this show for this question. And that was lovely, because you're living in the moment, and you're living your goals and your love for what you're doing now. And I love that. And from looking at the support from Christy, for example, you're making the right connections, you're doing the right things. So we really hope, and we'll support you all the way as best we can, that you continue with that. And I'm sure that's you're on that journey. And best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we do have some writing community chat show questions that are from the people in the comments. We definitely have a few questions coming in, which is great. Keep sending those questions in, because we've still got a few more minutes left. We'll try and
we've got to fix this issue, Chris, because I don't know why you can't press the button, but I'll press it for you. You can read it out. Go on, go for it.
So if you could bring any of your characters to life for one, oh my God.
Halo, come on.
For one night stand, no consequences. Who would you choose and why? Thanks, Halo. Like, you really.
It's not they're not in this book. They're in the next book.
Please. All right. Okay. Go on. Tell us.
Well,
sneak preview.
You don't have to. You really don't.
Yeah, no, there's my book that's coming out next May is called A House Like an Accordion. And it's about a woman who realizes she's starting to disappear literally on her 39th birthday. And the only way to stop it is to find her father, who's been missing since she was 15 and who was a very skilled artist. And his skill manifested itself by whatever he drew from reality. So if he was very skilled, but whatever he wound up drawing was pulled out of reality. And so she realizes he's drawing her, and she has to track him down.
Wow.
And does that through the
Stephen King level sort of narrative.
But she finds him through the houses that he built, and in the process of doing that, she reconnects with somebody from her childhood named Tobias. Hands down, that would be him.
Hands down, lovely. From the same person, you wouldn't believe it. You would, because she's very intelligent. As a lawyer, have you ever written annoyingly? Have you ever? I am not intelligent, clearly. Have you ever written annoying clients into your writing, giving them different names?
I have not. And actually, that's one of my favorite things about writing is I don't write anything about law. I don't write anything about work. I don't write that as a humorist, not as a novelist, not as an essayist. It is completely divided. from anything that I do professionally. And so, yes, I can confidently say I have never actually used an annoying client. And I don't have, all my clients are perfect. All my clients are perfect human beings. They're wonderful.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Christy says it. Yeah, go on, Chris.
Stephen King, and the Raven Boys. It's a perfect blend. It sounds like an amazing novel, Audrey, and
Thanks.
I'm really looking forward to, someone actually disappearing because their dad is drawing them. Like, talk about a need for like an urgency straight away when you're picking it up and you're thinking, wow, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
We got a question from Robin, and it's one that's on the list. So thank you. We'll definitely, you reminded me of this. Please talk about the next book from Robin, Facer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the book I was just talking about. So that's A House Like an Accordion. So it's about a woman, and that book started also because of a house. I started writing that because I had an idea from a tweet that someone had sent out about if money was no object, what would you spend it on? And I was surprised that the answer that immediately popped into my head was I would go back and buy all those houses that my parents built when I was growing up.
Yeah.
So that's where the story started.
So when can we expect that book to become something in the future? Like, when can we get excited about that?
Yeah, so it's coming out next May 2024 in the U.S. And hopefully other places. But yeah, it's coming out with Penguin Random House with Berkeley, which is the same publisher that I have in the U.S. for the Minuscule Mansion.
Lovely. Okay, Chris, we're on the hour. Do you have any last questions before we have to wrap this up? Because we are pushing over the time, and we want to get Audrey back to her children who are running around the house and enjoying the summer holidays. Anything else before we finish up?
No, I mean, Chrissy's just put in the comments, do you want to talk about your satire? Which does intrigue me a little bit.
So all of my satire is on my website, which is audreyburges.com, and I update that as those are published. The vast majority of the ones that I've published are in McSweeney's Internet Tendency, which is probably the outlet I've published with most. A lot of it is parenting humor, but a lot of it is just kind of random. You heard one of the pieces I mentioned earlier that I was thinking of putting together. So, and I'll have a piece coming out in Shouts and Murmurs for the New Yorker later on this summer.
So, parenting humor. Like, I'm a parent, I get some parent. Give us your sort of like, let's imagine you're at a party right now and you had to tell a story about your kids that is going to get the whole room into raptures. Which story would it be?
Oh man, probably the first parenting piece I wrote that went really viral was a quiz that was, are you baking holiday cookies with children or starring in a I can't remember if it was a gritty procedural criminal show. And that was because I had, in the process of baking holiday cookies with my kids, had just, it looked like a drug bust. It was, our entire kitchen was covered in white powder. We just had, open bags everywhere. I kept screaming at people to wash their hands. I'm calling a grizzled old timer on the phone to ask for advice for how to do this. And it just kind of turned into its procedural. Yeah.
Flush it.
Yeah. So, and I wrote the same thing earlier last year. I wrote about, are you decorating for the holidays with children, or starring in a heist movie, which was an Ocean's 11 spin on. Yeah.
Audrey, your answers have been fantastic. Your conversation has been amazing. Before we finish this up, where can people find out more about you, and where can they get the latest book, which is The Minuscule Mansion of Myra Malone?
You almost got it. You were so close.
Almost. I thought I did. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You got it. Yeah. No, it's so the Minuscule Mansion was out as of June 1st with Pan Macmillan, and you can find it wherever books are sold. I hope you will patronize your favorite independent bookstore. And I also, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Audrey_Burgess with one S. My website is audreyburgess.com. I'm on Instagram at Audrey Burgess, all one word, and on Facebook at A Burgess Writes.
Do you know, I love it when people know their handles and their websites. It's so good. And yes, in the comments, the description of this video, you will find the links to that now. Please go buy the book. Please enter the raffle we talked about earlier. Please support Audrey on Twitter and social media. We will be supporting her from now on. Once you're part of this family, you are part of this family. We will not let you go as much as you ask us to let you go. We'll bug you forevermore.
I hope you will. Please bug me.
We will. Trust me. Audrey, thank you so much. Guys watching in the chat, if you're listening back on the podcast, thank you again, because you guys help us out as well. Or you're watching it back on YouTube, thank you. Please consider joining live and hitting subscribe, because when you're live, you can ask the questions to Audrey herself, to the authors, to us, and you can just learn a lot more doing it that way. And it's been a great fun chatting. It's great to be back, Chris. I hope you've had a good time as well. Audrey, you too. Any more questions? Any more comments?
No. Is it Tobias? I want to say Tobias.
Yes.
Yes. Look out for Tobias. That's all I'm going to say.
Yes.
We'll leave it on that. Look out for Tobias, because Tobias is the one.
Yes.
Tobias is the one.
For now, until the next one.
Yeah,
I'm very
until the
fickle.
Until the next time.
Guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next week with another brand new show. Please support everybody in the writing community. That's what we're here for. That's what we love. We love you all. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you very soon. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.